Hi, I'm here with the next Sundown devlog. During the past month, I've done a lot of experimenting, and to be completely transparent, a lot of procrastinating because this stuff can be overwhelming, at least for me, but I am excited to share what I've been working on. I've made some new models and learned some awesome stuff in Blender, started animating in Unreal Engine, and done some more coding. And I've also made some big changes to the story. Okay, so first up I have a very simple model. This is just what I made for Metal. This is what Metal will look like in the inventory of the game, and then this is the angle for the thumbnail that you'll see. Very simple thing. Now let's get into the actual models I've been working on. Alright, so I've been working on modeling the containers that the player will use to extract different liquids from the alien environment. Here you can see the 5 different liquids in the container. It's very hard for me to show you this just because of how long it takes to render these shaders because I haven't baked them yet into textures. But you can see that the ends of them have this like little hole, and let me turn off, so there you go. They have like this little hole which would be like, I don't know, where like a needle goes in or something to extract the liquid, and there's like a yellow ring around it, and then they have a different color corresponding to the liquid. And so that's just supposed to help the player when they're viewing it from the inventory, because I wanted some more indicators of which liquid is which, and here they are. I will play a video real quick showing off all 5 of them, because this isn't the best way of looking at them. You'll note in the video that the liquid doesn't animate. I don't know why it doesn't. I'm trying to fix that. But the main reason I wanted to show you guys this is because I wanted to show off how I was able to make these textures. Because these textures were made entirely by me using noise. Like, I didn't actually have to paint anything. This was all done procedurally, and I wanted to show off how that's possible. In case anyone watching these is interested in learning Blender or is learning Blender, I think this is pretty cool. So let me show that off. Alright, so on the bottom here you can see this thing called a node group, and this is within the shader editor in Blender. And here I have a custom node group I've created where I can modify all these values related to the liquid. I won't do it now because it'll take a lot of time, but you can see, so W refers to like the, this, I don't know how to explain it, like the time that the noise is at, and so if I were to slide this W, it kind of makes the liquid move, and so I animate this during a timeline to make the liquid actually like move around. And then I have the scale of it, detail, roughness, distortion, and then here I can switch between a Voronoi or noise factor or for the liquid. So Voronoi is a type of noise, but it's different from like normal noise, and those are both just different types of noise, and they both have different looks that are, like could be better for the liquids depending on what I want. And so you can see the 2 ones on the left, these 2 both use noise, but then you can see the 2 in the middle here, the green and the blue and purple one, those use the Voronoi texture. That one creates more of these like cell-looking structures. And then I have a noise map here, and you can see on the left and right, and on the green one, you can see the reflection, and it looks very bumpy. That wouldn't be there normally, but I created some other systems to add bump, and I can modify those as well. And then at the bottom here, I can modify the colors. So I guess I can show this off. So I can make it red, and that's affecting the one right here. I can make this green, and I can change like which one affects what. I can change how much it glows, because I can make it like glow a ton or glow not much. But then I can go into this node group, and you can see all the nodes that were used to make this. And so how a node group works is you have an input where you have all the things you want, the system you want to be able to like input to your node group, and then you just connect those to the values you want. So here you can see I'm putting the W into a divide just so it's not as intense, because the W needs to be only modified a small bit to make a huge difference, so I just divide it. And then you can see like liquid scale goes into the scale of both noise textures. We have normal noise, and then we have the Voronoi texture. And we have like the colors going into the colors, the color ramp or whatever, the mix right here. And so it's a really neat feature where you can make your own custom shaders that you can modify just by switching values around. So I just wanted to show that off to you guys in case anyone finds that interesting. And so I can just exit the group and just do whatever I want. I can just modify these values to change tons of stuff. So it makes making shaders really easy. And this was my first time making shaders, and I was able to make this really interesting liquid texture that I was able to use for all 5 of these liquids. I know most of you guys don't care about this at all, but I do want to share what I'm learning, so there you go. Now let's move over into what I've been doing in Unreal Engine. Okay, so first off, you'll notice that now I have a proper animation for when you're holding the flashlight. You can see that the hand grips the flashlight in a more normal way. I have a cup next to me, and I had to grip the cup so many times to try and get the right, hand position. And it's still kind of awkward, but it's the best I can do right now. And this is my first time animating with Unreal Engine, so it's a pretty big step ahead. I'll showcase how I ended up animating. It might not be the exact right way, but this is what I found that worked for me, at least so far. As you can see, I don't have animations for when you're running. It just stays the same idle animation where you can just see the hand slightly moving around. Same for jumping. So right now it's just this, but you'll notice if I were to click off, and sorry the hotbar is slightly cut off by the screen capture I'm doing right now, but if I were to switch off of the flashlight, it goes out of that into an idle position. These idle animations were already there, I just didn't know that until now, but they're slightly off with the camera, so I'm going to have to redo them. So you see when I run, you can see the parts where the torso should be, or the part where the arms meet the torso, just in front of the camera, so I definitely have to work on that. But at least, oh, sorry for clicking that debug button, but at least now I can switch between different sorts of animation trees, and I'll explain what that is in a second. So just like with other things in Unreal Engine, you can use blueprints to code them. So here you see the first-person animation blueprint, and here you can see the first-person model. Obviously this is placeholder, this is just what I have for now, and you can see these different elements of the blueprint, and I want to explain these so I can teach you guys what I've learned so far. So we have these different animations. So you see we have base animations, flashlight animations, and gun animations. Then down here you can see that I'm caching them. Not exactly sure how that works, but I'm caching them. Then I am blending between them based on an integer. So what this integer does, I'm calling it holding int. And so what this does is it'll take a variable, or it's a variable that holds an integer, and based on the integer, it loads a different set of animations. So here you can see that it is 0, which means we're using our base animations. Those are the idle ones when you don't have a tool or a gun in your hand, or a flashlight or a gun in your hand. But if I switch that to 1, then we switch to this, where we have that hand position for the flashlight. You can see it on the top left. Then if I switch it to 2, we switch to the gun animations. Isn't that neat? And so I can do this mid-gameplay, and that's what I showed you earlier. So what are these state machines? Well, these state machines hold these animation trees where they switch between different animation sequences based on certain triggers. So here we have the first-person idle, which is what we're looking at. Obviously, this is an idle animation. But you can see here, it can transition into and out of a run. It can transition into a jump, and it can a jump end can transition into the idle. And so you can see here, let's click on this one for instance. This is the code that makes it go from an idle animation to a jump animation. And it just checks, are you in the air? Simple as that. And then this is a Boolean variable, which is, I define elsewhere, I'm not exactly sure where. So let's check this one, where we go from idle to run. All it checks is, are we moving? And if we're not moving, then boom, it will go from run to idle. Very simple. And then if we want to go from the start of the jump to the jump loop, we just check the length of the jump animation to see if it's complete, I believe. And then if it is, we move over to the jump loop. And all these animation trees are the same, just with different animations. And so like I mentioned before, they're comprised of something called animation sequences. And you can see most of them right here. My screen is slightly cut off. But you can see we have first person falling, first person flashlight falling. Ignore the ones that say new, that was just me having to replace some stuff. But so I can go to any one of these and showcase how you can edit a sequence. Here you can see the sequence when we're holding the flashlight and we're idle. You can see if I slow down that there's a slight bit of movement there. And that was there from the original gun idle animation that I replaced with this, or I added into this. But let's say I wanted to make it so that your other arm was pointing forward for whatever reason. So I'm going to pause, go over to 0 on the timeline, and then I can just make that change. So I can make it so the bones are visible if I go to character, bones, and all hierarchy, but I can also just go over to the side here, go to the hierarchy, and find the bone we're looking for. So we're looking for the upper arm, and I can just rotate it, and I can rotate it based on the relative position or the global position. You can see the difference there. So let's go with the relative position, and I can just rotate here and move the arm up, and I can do this as well while snapping. So we can move it, then we'll move it a bit this way, and now the arm is up. Does that look very odd? It does, but it's there. And so now you'll notice if I were to start the scene, that change is not actually made. Why is the change not actually made? I have no idea whatsoever. But what I do know is that if you click key, then that change will be made. And you don't have to click key on every single bone you've changed, but clicking key on one bone, it logs all of those changes onto the timeline here. And so you can see here where I modified different parts. You can see all the fingers that I moved to make it grip the flashlight. Now if I go over to the scene, the arm will be up. So that is how you edit a animation sequence. And you can see here if I go to my run animation, which is a different sequence, my arm goes back down. So if you're trying to learn animation in Unreal, that is what I've learned so far. How to make a sequence from scratch, I'm not exactly sure, because so far I've only been editing animation sequences. You also may be wondering, where do I change the holding integer? Where do I go for... What tells my blueprint to go from the animation where I don't have a tool or have a flashlight to the animations where I do have a flashlight? Well, that's done in the first-person character blueprint. So you see here that I'm getting the arms, which is what we're trying to animate. I'm getting the instance, I'm casting to it. Then from there, I can get anything. I can get any of the variables from it and set those to whatever I want, or just get them. And so you see here, I'm setting the holding integer to 0. And up here, which is when I attach the flashlight to the player, I am setting it to 1, meaning you're holding a flashlight. But when I destroy the flashlight, I set it to 0. So that's how I communicate between the first-person character and the first-person animation blueprint. Alright, now the last thing up is the cable to player, which you can see right here. I'm gonna try using it now, but it might not work because I haven't tested it in a bit. Let's see. Okay, there it goes. I think it's working. Yeah, there we go. See, it took us down to the ground. So there's not much to showcase new with it right now, but I am currently developing the system for the cable deployer to take you back up to your base. And there's a lot more that goes into that than it sounds, and that is my big coding project right now. You can see that I've made it so the radius around the cable deployer where you have to be in for it to take you up or down is now actually be able to, you can actually see it. I made a little debug thing around it so you can see it. And then you can also see the big cube around us, or I guess rectangle cube thing. And that is the radius that you need to be in for the cable deployer to deploy when you're on the surface. And I'm not sure how that's going to work exactly. Right now you can see it's deploying when I get in the radius, but it's already deployed, so it doesn't do anything. And the plan is for when you get out of the radius, it goes back up on its own. And that's what I'm working on right now. But you can see that the radius around where you have to be now goes down with the cable deployer. Before, it didn't do that, so that's a big leap too. So, I know that was confusing, and I'm going to make it even more confusing now, because I'm going to show off the code. If you want to leave, that's fine. I am going to be talking about some story details later on, so you might want to stick around for that. But I just want to explain what I'm doing right now in my coding journey. That sounds stupid. So here's a ton of code, probably way more than I ever need for something this simple, but I'm learning. A lot of this is because I haven't touched in a bit that I'm going to have to remove or change when I get into making all the features work. But I do want to show off some interesting things. As you can tell, I've labeled everything, which is very important to do. This right here is what makes the cable deployer actually deploy. So I'm tracing a line down to the surface, I'm getting the hit result, and using the start and end to interpolate and make it go down, and then, if needed, make the player go down with it, which is right here. This checks if you're near the cable deployer, and if so, it will dispatch something to tell the player to deploy down or up. And then here, we're actually binding that event to the player. So a big way of communicating between different blueprints or different actors is by binding events. So here, if we're in the deploy radius, the on-base deploy radius, which is a collision sphere right here, then we're casting to the first-person character. We're getting the other actor, casting to that actor, and if it's a first-person character, then we're setting a variable to that so we can use it later, and then we're binding an event to it. So we're binding deploy on cable. So now within the first-person character blueprint, it can use that dispatch called deploy cable, whatever it's called. Yeah, here it is, deploy on cable. And so literally all it does is it takes an input and it calls deploy on cable. So that sounds like you can deploy whenever, even if you're not around the cable deployer. That's actually not true, because that event is being unbound if we're not in the radius. So we're having this event binded to the player only when they're within the radius that should be binded to them, which is a really cool bit of code on my part. So we're giving it this event, and if it calls that event, then we go down. But if we get out of the radius, it will unbind that event, and it won't be called anymore. It's really neat because it removes a dependency when it's not necessary, and getting rid of dependencies or reducing the amount of dependencies is very important in code with Unreal Engine, I think with everything. So dependencies are basically times when blueprints are communicating with each other, which makes them dependent on each other. And that can become a huge nest of dependencies that ends up being very hard to work with if you're trying to change something. So you try and get rid of dependencies when you can. And here's an example where I unbind an event, thus removing a dependency. Alright, so I know that was a lot of just me explaining stuff, probably poorly, but I don't have a ton to share, and I just wanted to explain what I'm doing, and I hope I can help someone by doing that, and teach someone something about Unreal Engine that they didn't know before. So, what are my next steps? So my next steps are to create animations when you're holding the flashlight, because right now it doesn't do anything. I also just want to learn how to make better first-person animations, because so far I've just been making poses. And then I want to create the animations for when you're not holding a flashlight, because right now, as you can see, they are not looking good at all. I can probably just move the character back, but I want to learn how to make first-person animations better, so I'll be working on that. Then I'm going to be making the cable deployer fully functional, and making an animation for the player when they're on it. Then from there, the game will have a way of taking you down to the surface and back up. The player won't be able to build anything yet, but at least I can go down and up in game. From there, I think I'm going to be making the map. I really want to make the map because it'd be so fun, and then I can actually have something to show as background footage instead of Subnautica footage. But it'll either be that or working or making the building system. Those are the two things on the horizon, and I'll probably be able to talk about one of those two things in the next video. Alright, so let's get into the last part of this video, which is changes to the story. Some huge changes. And yes, for this section, I'll be using Subnautica background footage. I'm sorry. So, I was watching the movie Shin Godzilla a couple weeks ago, and I realized that it had a really similar plot when it comes to the monster in that, which is obviously Godzilla. It turns out Godzilla in that movie is basically a living nuclear reactor, which is what I wanted the Sky Beast in my game to be. And so that was a really interesting coincidence, and I took a lot of notes on how they dealt with that. The big thing I noticed is that they figured that out very quickly. It wasn't this huge mystery. And in my game, I wanted the mystery to be what allows these big flying beasts to fly like this. How can they do it? How can they stay in the air for so long? And it just seemed like too simple of a mystery when watching Shin Godzilla. So I decided I needed a larger mystery surrounding the game to entice the player and keep it interesting. So I'm not going to spoil it here, but if you go to the Trello, you'll see the revised story. It should be up by the time this video comes out, and it's been completely rewritten. So now there's a larger conspiracy surrounding Salerna, and the mystery is a lot more interesting and a lot more unique, and it still includes the living nuclear reactor stuff, but it makes a little bit more sense. What I realized is that you need to have something that doesn't exist in our world to explain the more out there concepts in a sci-fi story, at least in mine. You'll know similar things in movies like Avatar where they have a new element called unobtainium. And so I have something very similar to that, where it allows some of these more out there concepts to work, and not conflict with real science. And so with this new story, again, I won't explain all of it, but with this new story, I am actually able to include more landmarks onto the map. I am able to include previous human civilizations, not civilizations, previous human outposts on this planet that have long been destroyed, and they're part of the mystery. So you actually get to find these outposts and learn things about Salerna and this huge conspiracy and what's going on and try and solve this mystery. And I'm also thinking of having resources that you can find at these outposts that can make you stronger, help with your base, that type of thing. And there's another landmark that this new story allows for that I won't spoil, but I think it'll be really cool if I can pull it off. So basically, the story is a lot cooler now in my opinion. I've thought about it a lot more, and I think it makes more sense. It allows for more landmarks, which is super important in an open world game like this, and I'm really excited for it. And yeah, so there's the devlog for this month. I'm sorry that I don't have a lot to share. I'm hoping that once I get the hang of these really complicated tools, at least they're complicated for me, I'll be able to create stuff much quicker. But for the time being, this is the pace that works for me. I hope I was able to teach you guys some stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.